we should have known that things were going to be weird this weekend on Friday night. I had my cousin over. We were downstairs here. We were watching the Georgia Tech game. He said, what time should I come over? What games are good today? And I looked at the schedule. I said, well, clean old-fashioned hate. What's that? I said, okay, Georgia Tech, Georgia at least has potential to be kind of weird.
Definitely.
Come on over for that one. So he came over. He eventually left before overtime was finished, drove home 20 minutes, and I was like, hey, game's still on. You can
still going.
Still going. Georgia Tech, Georgia, final. Georgia wins 44-42 in 8 overtimes, Dan.
Yes.
They went to the penalty kicks here. 8 overtimes. Georgia Tech, Haynes King left it all out on the field. At one point in the second half, they definitely ran out of juice. It was clear when they ran out of juice, when Haynes King was on fumes. Georgia somehow finding a way to come back and win this game was miraculous. It was not a pretty game by any stretch of the imagination. There were Georgia Tech receivers open literally the entire football game.
Yeah.
The entire football game. This was not a defensive clinic on either side of the ball.
Especially key third downs, third and longs. Georgia Tech receivers open, yeah.
Mind-blowing to me. And just a little side-to-side motion, a fake handoff from Haynes King. Boom, a guy opened down the seam. It was the same thing the entire game. Georgia's got to figure that out before they play Texas in the SEC title game, before they play whoever in the college football playoff. I don't know if they will. It's pretty late in the season by now. But this game was nuts. I don't know how much of this you saw. I stayed awake for the whole thing. It set me back today because we're obviously up late too, and this thing will be up late editing and whatnot. It was one of these deals where it's like you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar. Once you get past one overtime, it's like, all right, I'm in this till the end now. I can't turn this off.
No, I watched the whole game, and it was a fascinating watch. Georgia up front along this offensive line is still a huge issue. It's still like uncharacteristic for Georgia football to not just be dominant on the offensive line, but to be dominated at times by Georgia Tech, who hasn't had a pass rush this year. And
they haven't had a pass rush in 5 years, Dan.
They have. It's been a minute. It has been a minute. And you're right about Georgia Tech with the ball. The eye candy was constant. And, as beat up as Jamal Haynes, he was back and forth from the sideline to the backfield. Haynes King was finding pass catchers downfield. He himself, huge runs. Yeah. Georgia couldn't get off the field for long stretches of this game. They were doing a lot of shorter horizontal type passing stuff that wasn't there. As soon as they started going downfield in the second half, that's when things, obviously, they come back from a pretty significant deficit to force overtime. The overtime periods were crazy. You could see that nobody had legs at a certain point.
Nobody had legs. Georgia was dropping passes. They talked to Kirby after the game. He was like, we were out of 2-point conversion plays. We didn't have anything like It was like we both were. Both sides were out of that 2-point conversion play. And, they ended up winning it.
On a Nate Frazier run up the middle,
Nate Frazier run up the middle for sure. But the thing that I can't kind of get my head around is we saw what Georgia did to Texas earlier in the year and how they overwhelmed the Texas offensive line to the extent where they had to pull Quinn Ewers and put Arch Manning in the first half anyway, in hopes of maybe trying to add some more mobility to the conversation. So it wasn't like he was a fish in a barrel back there. What happened to that Georgia? What happened to that version of Georgia? Because in theory, they should have been able to do the same. It's a good Georgia Tech offensive line, mind you.
Yeah.
You're not Texas. So what happened to that version of Georgia since that Texas game?
I mean, it's way later in the season. Legs are tired. People are beat up. It's a different offense, right? That Buster Faulkner and Haynes King and whatever Georgia, the best of Georgia Tech is, it's, it kept Miami off balance. Who knows what Georgia Tech's record is if Haynes King stays healthy this year?
Sure.
They're a good team. They're an inventive offense. They keep defenses sort of on roller skates. And I'm not going to say Texas is more direct. They were just up for that game, that specific Texas game earlier on in the season, in a way that is just more difficult for whatever reason at the end of the season against Georgia Tech at home. Maybe they just felt like they could sleepwalk and beat Georgia Tech. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the Georgia way, that Kirby Smart has this team winning a bajillion games. So obviously he's doing something right to keep this team motivated. But I don't know. It just, for whatever reason, whether it's a transfer thing, whether it's specific guys not buying in or not having the fire lit under them because Will Muschamp isn't a part of this defensive staff, whatever the reason, it comes and goes, right? That sometimes you'll see that, but then you have the Ole Miss game and you have the Kentucky game. Yeah. And sometimes it's the offense figuring it out. Sometimes it's the defense figuring it out. And sometimes you give up 30 points to Mississippi State or 40 points to Georgia Tech. And I don't know. I think we're holding Kirby Smart to like such a crazy standard because he is shoulder to shoulder with Nick Saban in terms of modern greatness at coach, that like your down year is still getting into the playoffs as a top 10 team. It's pretty good.
It is pretty good. And it maybe has taken us to this point in the season, 14 weeks in, to again be reminded of the fact that this is not the same Georgia we have seen the last couple of years.
It just isn't. That's okay.
It's okay, but it's a bit of a head trip.
Yeah.
If you follow it the way we do, it's a bit of a head trip. So Georgia finds a way to win 44-42, 8 overtimes, a miraculous way to come back and win.
I really was hoping that like weird alt strategy or alt formation that Georgia Tech went with, like all the linemen split out to the left, trying to go to the tight end in the corner or the back of the end zone. I really hope that was the way. Like Kirby Smart wouldn't sleep until June if that had worked, but it did not.